When I got the email about would I be interested in having Suzanne Giesemann as a guest on Life, Death, and the Space Between, I was jumping up and down. Suzanne is someone I've been following for a long time. And the reason why her story is so fascinating, which you'll hear about on the podcast, is because she comes from a Navy commander background and opened up to mediumship after the death of a loved one. Her story is incredible. It is in her new book out now called Making the Afterlife Connection, The Journey from Doubt to Knowing That Death is Not the End. And it really digs into these spiritual concepts. And what is so amazing about Suzanne is her authenticity and her ability to really distill these concepts down in a way that is digestible and so easily accessible. We also talk about her film that she's recently worked on called Wolf's Message. It's a documentary film about a young man whose nickname was Wolf, and the drawings and poetry that he left behind that detailed exactly how he would die. So her work is fascinating. She is one of the most 100 spiritually influential living people that there is in the universe right now. You do not want to miss this episode with Suzanne Giesemann.
We need at our table of awareness the logician, but equally we need the intuitive, we need the mystic.
I almost died. I was allowed to go to the very precipice of death, of life and death, and look over the edge. And I was allowed to behold what was there and allowed to come back. Most people aren't.
When we talk about being aligned with ourself or being aligned with our soul or hearing our higher self, that's really what we're talking about, is being connected to that divine part of ourself, that light-filled part of us that is connected to God energy, that is connected to everybody here and every experience we've ever had.
If more doctors, more professionals can open up to use intuitive gifts in their work, that's really important.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, mediumship, near-death experiences, consciousness, and what it all means. Welcome, Suzanne, to Life, Death, and the Space Between.
Oh, thank you, Amy. It's just a joy to be with you.
And this is an interview. I think your publicist reached out to me, or PR person. And no, it was a connection through a woman named Meredith who had been listening to my podcast, who I believe is friends with maybe your assistant or someone. And she sort of reached out, and I was like, oh my God, I have been wanting to have Suzanne on the podcast for so long, and was a little bit intimidated to reach out because you are sort of like the Michael Jordans of mediums in terms of your just, I think in many ways where you came from is similar to my background, right? Not exactly the same, but being someone who was so not in this space to moving into this space. So can you talk a little bit about, you were a naval commander who was front and center during 9/11. So can you talk a little bit about your background and how you also had a pretty profound loss that catapulted you into this?
Yes, I 20 years in the Navy and was very much left-brained, by the book, secular, no religious upbringing, not on the spiritual path at all, and had the great honor of being a commanding officer ashore in the Navy. I joined so long ago that women were not allowed on most ships, so I served 9 different assignments ashore and 2 foreign assignments, and was a special assistant to the head of the Navy, and then in my last job, the personal assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's the head of the whole United States Armed Forces. So it wasn't just that I was a commander. I got to see what it's like at the very top of our military and political system. I was with, the chairman when he was with the president 12 times, I counted, and flew on Air Force One. So that's my background. And I jokingly say, but I'm not so sure it's a joke, if I had told people then that I talked to those who have passed, they would have probably taken my security clearance away. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea that was even in my future. I didn't see spirits. I didn't really have any evidence that there was a greater reality because I didn't have a need to investigate it. Then I had a need few years after I retired, my husband and I, as a result of being very up close and personal on 9/11.
Can you tell us a little about that? Because that's a crazy story in its own right.
Well, I was the chairman's aide on September 11th. We left the Pentagon early in the morning and took off for Europe. Later in the week, the general was going to be knighted by Queen Elizabeth. I was so excited because I was going to be there to witness that right there with the Queen, the knighting. Wow. And we were a couple hours out over the Atlantic, and we got the same word that everybody else got, that a small plane had attacked, had hit the World Trade Center. And we didn't think much of it. Then we got word about the second attack, and we're briefing the general who was sitting in the back of the aircraft at the time. And he nodded his head and he said, "Take us back to Washington." So I went up to the cockpit and told them to turn us around. And the pilot looked at me and he said, "Commander, we're the last aircraft in U.S. airspace. We're going to have fighter jets escorting us, and our flight path takes us right over Manhattan." So I have photos of the burning smoke coming up from Manhattan. We didn't realize at the time the towers had collapsed. We landed back in Washington, D.C. A big motorcycle and police escorted us through the deserted streets back to our office building, which now has smoke coming out of it. Mm-hmm. But the streets are cleared. The Pentagon is empty except for essential personnel. And I stepped over jet engine pieces in the grass going to look at the gaping hole in the building where we work. It was surreal. So that really was the moment when I started asking deep life questions, but I didn't get any satisfactory answers. I had no spiritual beliefs to fall back on. I had no coping tools. So basically, I retired and ran away from life. We had a dream, my husband and I, to go sailing into the sunset, become full-time cruisers on a sailboat. That wasn't running away, but the fact that I was really eager to do it now so I wouldn't have to be in Washington anymore. And they issued everybody in the Pentagon a gas mask. And I thought, I don't want to work in an environment where we have to worry about this every day.
Right.
So off we went, and life was somewhat idyllic. It's a very challenging lifestyle, although it sounds wonderful to live on a sailboat. But it was also very remote. There was a lot of solitude. And I'm used to this.
Lots of time to be with your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. And I'm used to this, interacting with people, being part of something so much bigger than yourself, in service to others. And here I am in these remote waters. Well, we crossed the Atlantic, which was an amazing experience. And we eventually ended up off the coast of Croatia and got a phone call that made everything so much more personal. And that was when we learned that my stepdaughter, Susan, who was 27 years old and a sergeant in the Marine Corps, was crossing the flight line to report to duty, and a bolt of lightning came out of the blue and struck her. And they worked on her for 7 hours and couldn't save her or her 6-month unborn baby. Yeah. So now all of a sudden, this is up close and personal. And the turning point for me, I know you've read my book, was her funeral, Susan's funeral, and seeing her body and having this knowing, which I now know comes from the soul, but I didn't even know what the soul was at the time. But this knowing that there is something more than this body, and that Susan had to still exist. Hard to explain to a left brain person that you just have this certainty, but I did. And so that was the start of my spiritual journey. It was looking for Susan.
So, but it didn't unfold for you. I think people often think, I'm going to open up and suddenly this is going to happen. And what I love about your story and what you talk about in your new book, one of many, many books, but Making the Afterlife Connection, is you really profile your journey to opening up. So can you walk us through that? Because I think people think that you either do this or you don't do this. It's either on or off for you. And if it's off for you, it can never be on for you.
Oh, see, that's the thing. People think you're a born medium or you see spirits or you don't, just like you said, Amy. And it is a readjustment of our energy field. It's a training of our brain to not focus primarily on the left hemisphere, to dampen the left hemisphere's activities and activate the right hemisphere activities for a whole brain state, but then to balance thinking with this knowing sense that awakened in me when I saw Susan's body. I somehow knew that I had to sit quietly and meditate. This was 2007, and meditation wasn't so mainstream then, but I knew I had to get quiet and just say, Susan, reveal yourself to me. So I did that every day for maybe 10 to 20 minutes a day. And I laughingly say the first 3 weeks I fell asleep every day because I never slowed down. And so to sleep for 20 minutes, the body says, oh, nap time.
Yeah, the mind was probably so relieved, like finally.
Yeah. But I didn't realize I was training myself in expanded states of consciousness, in balancing the brain, in accessing intuition, which came online in a big way. I suddenly started knowing more things, and they were happening around me. I would hear things from people and I'd think, that's not right. It's this. And I'd counter what they said. And they said, well, you're right, actually. And so we all have this innate intuitive sense in us, but it's dampened by paying too much attention outside ourselves. So that's the first thing that came on. But I didn't sense Susan, so I kept going at it every day. And the big turning point, the next one, because there are just so many, it is a journey to process, was when I took my husband to a medium, because I had heard about people who allegedly can talk to those who have passed. And I heard that there are some people that do it and get evidence. They don't just say, oh, there's this lovely white light and it's your loved one and they love you. They discern things that they couldn't possibly know. So I was very judicious in finding someone who I could trust, but who didn't know my last name, because I was so skeptical but open-minded that I didn't want to think, well, what if they looked me up online? What if they found information about Susan online? So this woman didn't even know who we were, what we wanted, what my last name was, and she knocked our socks off with irrefutable evidence that Susan was right there. My husband, retired Navy destroyer captain, was sobbing. I was sobbing. It changed my life. That led me down the path of mediumship to write about it. I found two wonderful mediums who practiced evidence-based mediumship. And in writing their book, because I was still meditating daily and expanding my consciousness, one of them, a teacher, Janet Nohavik, said, you can do this too. And here's how.
Because your consciousness, she sensed, was already expanded because of the meditation practice. You were already starting to access energetically, and she could sense that.
That's right. I mean, you can't just take somebody and sit them down and say, connect with the spirit. You have to really prepare this vessel, which is the body. Energetically, there are energy fields that make us up. There's a mental field and an emotional field, and these get pretty gunked up being human. And this consciousness runs into roadblocks. So I didn't realize that in those years now of trying to connect with Susan, I'm clearing out the gunk, so that when Janet said, there's a spirit here, what do you sense? I got hardcore evidence from a man that I couldn't see. I didn't feel him. And I said, how is that possible? I mean, really good evidence that I talk about in Making the Afterlife Connection. At the time, it felt like I was pulling data out of the air, very accurate data, but I didn't want data. I wanted a heart-to-heart connection if these are really spirit people.
I love that that wasn't enough for you.
Oh. So I set that as a goal, and I continued, and boy, now I feel them. We talk, we laugh, the spirits and I, in a reading. And but it's become so much more than mediumship. I didn't realize that mediumship is now a side activity that I do to help people reach self-realization. It's to a spiritual path for me that's brought peace and joy and a sense of connection with others that I never knew was possible.
So, okay. Well, you just blew like so many different paths open here. I'm like, which one do I want to take? Okay. So you have these mediumship experiences, you go down this rabbit hole of really exploring. You go to learn from mediums, you go to London, to Arthur Findlay Institute, you study there. You don't just want to hear and see, you really want to know. So what does that true knowing actually look like versus like, I think that's a hit and I share it and it's accurate, but it still doesn't feel spirit driven or trusting that.
The reason this connection is possible for all of us is because the connection doesn't take place from our physical senses. It takes place from the true essence of all of us, which is the soul, the part that never dies. So we have to learn how first that we are a soul and access that part of us beyond our story, beyond our fears and doubts, this place of just beautiful being, purity. And that's what I was accessing in my meditation without realizing it. And we're connecting with the souls of people who have passed. So at first, and this is what making the afterlife connection journeys with me through, is this journey of trust, because the subtitle is The Journey from Doubt to Knowing that Death is Not the End. And when I first started bringing other people's loved ones through, one of the biggest challenges is when you hear the spirits clairaudiently, it sounds just like our own thoughts. And so to discern, well, did I make that up or is this coming from the spirit, is a challenge at first until you learn to combine clairaudience with claircognizance, that knowing, clairsentience, a feeling. And then you also get clairvoyance. You see images. And when the four of those, we call them the clairs, start working together and flowing, there's a sense there that you just know you're not making it up. The human mind will jump in every once in a while and say, oh, this can't be, I'm not going to say that. But if you do enough sessions for people and you hold back because you're afraid of being wrong, and at the end, you find out you were right, it's so frustrating. Learn to trust the spirits. You don't necessarily trust yourself, but you trust the spirits. And then after a while, that's why it's a journey, there just comes this sense from the soul, I know this is true. And you just trust what to give. Yeah.
So when you talk in the book, one of the things you talk about is that the first couple times you sat, actually beings came through that were they more guides, would you say, more spirit guides than they were not loved ones, because you were sitting kind of in a seance, I guess, with friends. Right.
These were identified themselves as guides from an even higher vibration than those who have recently been in a human body. People might talk about different dimensions or different octaves. It's frequency field. And again, we put these beings to the test to let me know things I couldn't know. They were always benevolent. It was always for the greater good. It was always loving. And people who were present when I would bring through these beings were being helped, were being healed. I couldn't deny that it was helpful, so we just kept going with it.
So can you help differentiate the different energies that you bring through? And what does it feel like to you when it's a loved one versus a guide versus an angel, which I knew you got exposed to later and you were sort of blown away by that, maybe versus an ascended master? Like, what's the difference for people?
I would say right away, if some people just went, oh, now we're getting a little too far out there, just remember my background, that I didn't believe that angels were real. We talk about that in one of the chapters in the book, but you spoke about archangels. Check out my video on YouTube called Archangel Michael is Real. Just watch the whole thing and then decide for yourself, and you'll understand why I know he is real and why the higher vibrations are real, because the evidence is just off the charts. What happened in that one encounter, and that's just one of many. The difference is very subtle between those who have passed and who we might call guides and angels. I actually set up a system so I can tell the difference. When I'm connecting with loved ones in a reading and I want to know, were you the mother or their father? Were you a partner or a brother or a child? I've told them, I want to feel you over here if you're a mother, over here if you're a father. And I just sit expectantly and my head gets pulled to different positions. Then I feel a personality and a presence, and yeah, this is their child. But if it's a guide, my head literally gets pulled up higher, And I know it's a guide because they're telling me practical information for the client. Whereas a family member wants to talk about how much they love them, even though our guides love us. They know about current events in their lives. They want to make apologies and give thank yous. This is very healing work. It brings hope, but it also brings closure. But even though I say closure, it also shows that we move forward together with our loved ones who have passed.
It's been a while since I've talked to you about what I'm up to. I want to first start by thanking so many of my supporters who have supported me on Patreon and in my Circle community. What's so exciting now is we have my new Circle community up and running, where if you want to contribute to supporting the podcast, you can do so at different levels for different values. So head on over to my Circle group. You can actually find the link in the show notes below. And there's opportunities to continue to support the podcast. And I have to say, your support of the podcast is frankly what has kept this podcast going over time. I have been funding the podcast solely by myself. I get a little bit of money in advertising dollars, but not a lot. So anything that you can give, if you have found value in this podcast, and it's not just giving without anything back, I will give back to you. You will be a part of this community with opportunities for discounts and conversations and ask Amy anythings. But it's a great opportunity for you to support what hopefully has helped you over the many, many years. Also, there's so many other ways now that you can work with me. I am offering a group course called Live Your Life Backwards, which is finishing its first cohort this winter and has been absolutely incredible. There's retreats coming up. There's workshops. There's one-on-one sessions with me. So many options that we can work together. So make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed to my podcast, and make sure you're subscribed to my newsletter, where you will get a free soul wisdom workbook to help you dig deeper into the virtues that you want to be living in this lifetime. We all need so much more spirituality now. We are in a spiritual crisis, and I'm giving you so many tools to tap into your own spirituality. So check out, and don't forget to subscribe to Life, Death, and the Space Between so you never miss an episode. I think you talk in the book about someone who was referred to you by a doctor, and that this opened up. This woman was on the verge of trying to take her own life, and
I didn't know that. But her husband across the veil comes through, and he said to her, "This is right out of the book." He after telling her multiple things, that she looked at me and she said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because your husband's right here telling me." She didn't even tell me she had a husband across the veil. It was so clear. I have the goosebumps again. That was years ago, and I'll never forget it. I said, "Your husband just said, 'Don't you dare take those pills in your purse.'" And she looked back like this, and she says, "Nobody knows that I stopped at the drugstore on the way here, because if I didn't hear from my husband, I was going to take all of them." There's a responsibility to this work. I teach people how to do this. I have a lot of classes. I've taught thousands, the systems and the hows and the whys that it works. But one of the things I teach them, my rule number one, anybody that studied with me, they can parrot it back because it's so important. Do no harm. Rule number two is be ethical. If you don't really sense that loved one, then just say so. Don't make something up. Don't cheat. Don't search them online. Trust the spirits. We're here to serve them.
Well, and I think that's so important. And one of the things that is so important in my work and where I'm headed right now is really wanting to validate the work of mediumship in the field of psychology, in the field of mental health, because I think that we're at a spiritual health crisis right now, perhaps more than a mental health crisis right now, or that the spiritual health crisis is feeding into the mental health crisis. And I think it's so important that this work be really validated, because the field is so skeptical, and yet it can be such a powerful and transformative healing tool for people.
There's no doubt. I just yesterday had the most awesome encounter with someone in spirit, and it reminded me of a video that I put online when the medium James Van Prague said, "Suzanne, you got to put some of your readings online. You have to show people what good evidential mediumship is. That's a tricky thing because these readings are so personal. I don't want to go into a reading knowing this is going to be put on online or on air. I want to be there to serve my client. So when he said that, I had just done a reading for this couple named Patty and Dave Hart. It was profound. Their daughter had passed from cancer in her early 20s, and the evidence was exactly what I'm looking for. And that couple was transformed. So I went to them and I said, I know that was a very personal reading, but may I have your permission to put the complete reading unedited online? Because TV mediumship is edited. You're going to see the highlights. Not every medium. I don't know about other readings, but I'm never 100%. I got one reading that the guy said it was 100%, and I still say, nah, I don't think so. Because of the mode of communication, it's not like a telephone.
Right. I mean, but even if we communicated with each other, what you would hear from what I say and what I said are going to be two different things sometimes.
That's it. But I was always like the A student, right? I aim for 90% or higher.
I'm with you.
But I would love everybody, if you want to see what that reading was like, is go to YouTube, and it's called Actual Evidence of the Afterlife. And you wait till you see the profound difference between Patty and Dave when they first came on, gloomy, depressed for years, and at the end, completely transformed. They're now dear friends of ours, and Patty has not lost the joy from knowing that her daughter is here, is actively part of her life. Patty has now established her own connection with Lauren. That's why I teach people mediumship. Not that everybody needs to be a medium, but we can connect with our own loved ones and others if you desire.
Well, and I think what you said earlier too is, it has deepened your life. It has enriched your life. It has brought so much joy and connection, separate from being able to connect. I mean, you're in service to people, so I think that brings a lot of meaning. But just your own deepening of living, really.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I have another book called The Awakened Way. And that's what my joy is, teaching people to live the awakened way, which is consciously connected to higher guidance and divinely guided moment by moment. And that's what I've finally achieved in my life. It's taken years and years of practicing presence, listening, tuning in as often as I can remember to do so throughout the day, and being guided. It's phenomenal. It leads to these moments where you gasp and you say, wow. And you'd think by now I would not say wow, but I don't ever want to stop saying wow. It's
I know
awesome.
I was going to say it's awe-inspiring. Like every time I have these moments, they literally take my breath away, where I like gasp. I'm like, oh, that can't be. It cannot be, but it is. It's just
and little things and big things. Little things like, you don't forget to take that when you go out because you're going to need it. And something inside you says, no, I'm not going to need that, but you've learned to take it and you needed it. Little things, moment by moment. Just imagine how everybody's lives would flow if they let their guides do their job.
So let's talk a little about that. So let's talk about, you talk in the book a little bit about hitting walls in life and how might be for people. Many of my listeners have listened for years, and I've talked a lot about this, but I want to break it down for how spirit works and how spirit speaks to us, and also how spirit works through us. Because I think people sometimes feel like I need to hear this loud voice that says, your mother is here and she's telling you this.
That is the misconception. Yes.
So how does it work in everyday life if you're not someone maybe who's really spiritually minded, but you want to be more that way? How can you look for spirit to begin showing up for you?
You first set the intention to be guided, and you give permission for higher consciousness to work through you and guide you. And you agree from the heart, I'll listen and I'll act if it feels like that will be helpful. So you're right away setting up a partnership. You're acknowledging, okay, I'll be open to being guided. Does that mean I'm going to be a puppet on the strings? Well, I tell people, when life turns out so well, when flows so well, when you turn over the reins, pull my string, spirit. That's what I say. Just start getting these nudges and you act on them, and something wondrous happens. I was going to say magical, but it's not magic. Something wondrous happens, and you realize, where did that thought come from? It felt like my own. We're being inspired all the time. So we come to learn that our thoughts are not our own. We're part of a shared field of consciousness. And once you give permission to higher consciousness to inspire you with thoughts, you'll just suddenly have the thought to go get your nails done, for example. And you sit down and you're right next to the person that offers you a job. You know, that kind of thing. The timing of things starts astounding you. Plus, you're acting on these little nudges. I have a technique I teach in several of my books about being snagged by spirit. You give permission.
I like that word.
Yeah, because if I got a snag in this shirt, I would notice it and I'd look at it and kind of, now it's holding my attention. In real life, you wouldn't pull the thread, but with working with spirit, which is very much real life, your attention is snagged by something. Like I just looked across the room and there's this little hand that somebody gave me and it has the big letters joy on it. And I would say the pulling the thread part is, now why did that joy thing jump out at me just then? Oh, maybe I was going to call my friend Joy and I never did. I'll call her now. And then you pick up the phone and Joy is going through this really rough time and you are just what she needed. So you were just used to help Joy, because spirit snagged you, spirit being higher consciousness, whether it's a loved one across the veil, a guide, an angel, I don't care. Use me. And they use me by catching me. So snagging me. So I've given spirit permission to use snags as a principal tool for guiding me. And just like I'll be walking past a stack of books and one of them will just snag me. And I'll know there's something in there you need to read today. And I'll just start reading it. And then you see exactly why. So you get in this flow. It's like a dance with spirit. And this is the perfect way that we don't have to sit and meditate and listen. We're constantly just being aware of, why did that catch my attention? Pull the thread. I was inspired.
But don't you think there has to be some level of presence? Because I think we're so pulled in a million directions and people aren't paying attention. So they miss those snags.
That's why I started that whole discussion with saying you set the intention to notice the snags and you say to spirit, I want to be snagged. I'll be watching. And then they'd start to stand out. And the more you do this, the more it happens, even when you're not present, when you're just, because all of a sudden it has such a different feeling to it, a snag. You'll get used to it. It's a fabulous tool.
And then from snag, where do people normally go? Like, how do things progress? You talk a little bit, and maybe this is a good time to talk about your Bless Me system.
Oh, the Bless Me method is a 7-step process to go from normal waking consciousness to a very nicely expanded state of consciousness, meditation.
By the way, that reminds me, I've been doing your, what meditation was I doing that I loved?
The Sip of the Divine?
No, there's a 20-minute one.
Oh, Radiant Heart?
I don't think it's Radiant Heart. And I don't know why I can't remember it right now, because I was doing
Journey
it
of Remembrance.
Yes.
No,
is that it has the most beautiful music.
It's got to be Journey of Remembrance, but that one's 32 minutes.
No, this one's on your website for people who are looking. It's a perfect length. You speak in the beginning, and then I'm looking right now, and then it's music, and you just feel completely enveloped by it. Which one is it? Journey of Consciousness, I think.
Okay, that's probably that's a good one too.
Yeah.
And I work the Bless Me method into it, where it's breathe, lift, expand, surrender, shift, merge, and experience. But I teach all of that in the Afterlife, the Awaken Way book. I do talk about it also in Making the Afterlife Connection, and there's a video on YouTube. I like to make this information readily available. The
Mhm.
blessing method is when you have at least 10 minutes. And I don't meditate longer than 30 minutes at a time most days.
Mhm.
So for those whose big excuse is, I can't quiet my mind and I don't have the time to meditate, then I have this beautiful process called the sip of the divine, where sip stands for sit in peace, 3 minutes a
I know,
day.
I love that. Although for me, it wasn't long enough because I feel like it takes a little bit for me to kind of get into that state. And then when I get into that state, I don't want to leave that state. So,
Good. Yes. Yeah. And these states are what will change your world. You don't need to take unpredictable psychedelics. You can slowly, gently enter these lovely expanded states of consciousness and learn so much about yourself, how to raise your consciousness, and then you start making connections with your loved ones who have passed, and you start asking questions, and you discover it's like having a genie in the bottle. You get
Mhm.
helpful answers that you weren't expecting, and you know you're not making it up. Which
Mhm.
brings up the point, if you're skeptical, that's why in my books, I give you ways of testing that you're not making it up. We play the sign game. We ask for evidence. And then the spirit world will provide. They want us to know this is real. And
Mhm.
boy, is that fun, enlightening, helpful, healing. If this sounds too good to be true, you haven't tried it yet.
Mhm. What are I agree. I think it completely changes your relationship with life,
Yeah.
really. And it makes life joyful and playful and less anxiety provoking and just more engaging and, like you said earlier, like awesome. What have your Navy friends said? I mean, you're pretty out, so they know this about you. I mean, you worked, as you said, very high up in the US
Right. And
Navy.
the general who I work for did not want to have anything to do with it. He was raised in a very small town in the South, and I respected that, but I confronted him and I said, "Are you saying I'm faking this?" And he said, "I'm not saying that at all. I just don't believe in it." And I said, "That's fine. But if you were to dive into this more, you would know that this is real." To stand up to him was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't maintained contact with too many because in the military, you're always moving about so much. There's not a lot of time to make really deep friendships like I have now.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't email a lot when I was in the military, but the few people who do know about it, they have the reaction that so many others do. I want to know more, because everybody's had these, what I call no other explanation moments. And we all have the soul within us that's just nudging us to explore a little further if we'll get our own BS out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Read my book, so you know that stands for belief system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
May I just add something before we get away from what you just said?
Yeah. Yeah.
That yes, my life is wondrous, joyous. It has so much more love in it than I ever imagined. I tell people I know what emptiness feels like. I've been there. I spent decades there. I was a closet overeater, food addict for years. And now I know this fullness that many times I truly can't contain. But here's the point. Every day is not like that. I definitely have my moments because we're human also. And we came here as souls for the fullness of the human experience. Does this mean I won't grieve when someone I love passes? Not at all. I will grieve terribly, but there in the background and underneath it all will be this knowing that cannot be disturbed. All is well, ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Death is not the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I get cranky and I get irritable and I say snarky things, but I catch myself right away. And then instead of blaming others, which I catch myself right away wanting to blame, saying, "Oh, look at how that worked." I'm intrigued by the layers of humanness. And then I go inside and say, where'd that come from? How can I clear that out so that doesn't happen again? So I definitely have my moments, but as a whole, it's so much better than the first part of my life.
Well, and I think that that's what I loved so much about reading this book, and why before I think maybe before I started recording, I think we were talking a little bit, and I said that I started reading this book, and then actually I had to cancel our initial call because I had to attend a funeral of a childhood friend. And so I was almost done with the book, but I was so enjoying reading it that I didn't want it to end. So I wanted to wait until I was going to actually interview you to continue reading it. And it feels so relatable, like the way that you talk about this work, the way that you talk about being human, the way that you've come to this work. And maybe it feels so relatable because it validated for me a lot of what my journey has felt like. It has not felt like there's been these like loud voices screaming in my ear, like, hi, I'm your, you're dead, whoever's here. But it's been these really subtle shifts in energy that over time, I feel like I've been able to train myself to notice. And it just felt, and even as you're talking right now, it just feels so human that these practices don't necessarily make us, and they shouldn't. I think a lot of people get in trouble spiritually bypassing, like, oh, I shouldn't feel sad when a loved one dies. It's like, no, that's exactly what you avoided. And then you couldn't avoid it anymore.
Yeah. You said, it's not like they're shouting in your ear. Sometimes they do shout in our ears, and that's when they really need to. Yesterday, I had a drop in from actually the daughter of the couple in the
video.
In the video, and she showed me several things. I was writing it all down, just like in the documentary we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, we're going to.
There's a scene in there where I get a drop in the middle of the night and I'm writing in the dark with my eyes half open, half closed. Well, that happened yesterday morning, and I'm writing messages for her parents from Lauren, and she's giving me evidence too. So I called Patty and Dave and I said, she's showing me a gorilla suit. And Patty said, that's so funny. She showed you that the last time she dropped in on you. I said, oh, that's weird. You don't get it yet. And I said, well, let me go down the list. I gave a couple other things. I said, then she literally shouted at me, Barney. And her mother gasped and her father gasped. And they said, oh my God, Barney was this dinosaur that was her favorite character when she was little. She was obsessed with Barney.
The purple Barney.
We hated it. And all of a sudden I sensed, send me a picture of Barney. And she texted it to me. And I said, that's the gorilla suit. I was seeing what I thought was a gorilla suit, but it's this character here.
Right.
And that's why she shouted at me, because she gave it to me before visually, and I wrote gorilla suit. She did it again. I wrote gorilla suit. So she had to amp it up a little, right? And shout.
That's
what
amazing.
She was trying to get. It's funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking earlier today. I just started teaching this course called Spiritually Informed Therapy, and it's specifically for therapists. It's all about the neuroscience of spirituality, spiritual practices, spiritually transformative experiences. And I started by sharing with them that for 2 years, I had been trying to muscle my way into this course. Like I could not quite figure out what I needed it to look like. And I couldn't, I was trying all these different things and couldn't get there. And then I don't know where, I think I was in my bedroom and I just was like, I need this course to come to fruition. Like, help me. And within a minute, what dropped in was like the outline. It's never happened to me that profoundly, that the exact, every single thing that needed to be in there it was like clear as day. And I was thinking, okay, why did this have to be so hard? Why did I have to spend the last 2 years trying to muscle my way into it? And it was like, you just need, it was both a lesson in trust, but also trusting the timing of things, like that this was the time that it was supposed to come to me. And because it was maybe so hard every other time, it wasn't supposed to come to me at that time.
That's right. But you just caught on to a huge key in mediumship and connecting with our loved ones. You can viscerally, and everybody can do it now, feel the difference between needing and wanting and receiving. So right now, think in your mind, I really need to connect with my loved one. I really need and want to hear from my loved one. Feel that in your body, the need and the want. I feel it in the gut, in the heart. I feel constriction. My whole insides just clench. Now just take a deep breath and just exhale slowly. And now just affirm, something in me knows my loved one is here. I trust that this is real. I'm asking you in the best way possible to show yourselves or reveal yourselves to me. I will patiently listen and watch and be expecting your visit. There's no tension. And it's created a receptive energy field. It's all about the field.
So where do you think, I want to go back to the doctor that recommended that woman to you. Where do you think, or what is your sense of where things are headed in terms of people in the more scientific spaces being open?
Well, at that time, and that was a good 12 years ago when that doctor sent her, the doctor sent her because she said the doctor had tried everything else, medication and therapy, and nothing was working. And she said, well, I heard there's this woman who's a medium and she can connect. So why don't you try that? It was a Hail Mary.
Desperation, right?
Desperation. But where we're headed now is that scientists are understanding more that this is really not woo-woo. This is not, it can be totally secular. It doesn't have to be spiritual. It is science and frequencies and field interactions that are going on here. We're talking about vibrations that we can't normally measure. So once scientists and medical personnel begin to accept that consciousness exists at levels that we can't detect, but that it survives the physical body's death, now we can open up to a whole new modality of treatment.
And what do you think that treatment will look like beyond mediumship? I mean, mediumship feels like one piece of it, but I feel like a lot of the other work you're doing feels...
It's honoring the intuitive nudges. I mean, I have so many friends who are in the psychology field and the medical field, and they talk about the protocols and that they have to so rigidly follow these. I have one friend who was an emergency room doctor, but she would just intuitively know things. Another doctor, Jeff O'Driscoll.
Oh, I love Jeff.
He gave up his
Jeff
ER
years ago.
practice. Yeah, he was seeing spirits in the emergency room. He knew this was real, but you just can't tell everybody that's where you're getting your information. So we have to, just as in my documentary, Wolf's Message talks about, learn to find the balance between the head and thinking and the heart and knowing. It's a balance. We're not saying go completely to the other side and become woo-woo and flaky, which is what many people think this is, but acknowledge that the two sides, the non-physical and physical, create a wholeness. And that's why we talk about holistic medicine, right?
Tell us a little bit about this documentary. You're touring now all over the country.
Yes.
What is this documentary about?
It's called Wolf's Message, and people can watch a trailer and find out more at wolfsmessage.com. It is about a young man who was killed the same way my stepdaughter Susan was, struck by lightning. In this documentary that is 100% accurate and true, because I waited to find the right filmmaker who would be true to the story, because it's so phenomenal, you don't have to sensationalize it. He tells the story about how I met Wolf's, that's his nickname, Wolf's parents. When they found out that both of our children were struck by lightning, they said, we don't understand how our son knew that he was going to die by lightning struck. He left proof. And I said, well, I know there are things the soul knows that often come to the surface and we can't explain. So that's how he knew. But what are you talking about? And in the documentary, we show the irrefutable evidence he left that leads to this lightning strike and what happened afterwards. But then Wolf came to me multiple times with messages for all of humanity backed up by evidence. And the documentary is a bit of a mystery where we piece together these little breadcrumbs until you figure out what Wolf's ultimate message is. We've alluded to it here, that we're out of balance, really. We're just too much in the head, not enough in the heart. We got to balance the two. Humanity's humanity is out of balance. This obvious.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that.
But
I
if
think
people, sorry to interrupt you, but I gotta say,
no.
if people are willing to open their minds when you watch this documentary, it's a catalyst for change, because you can't watch this and not realize there's something more. And there's multiple lessons to this about mental illness, about taking away the fear of death, and about coming to know we are souls first and foremost, humans, temporarily. We've already won several awards. We won the Illuminate Film Festival Director's Choice Award, and it's now streaming on Gaia TV. And and you can also watch it on demand from wolfsmessage.com. And then we still have quite a few live screenings where I talk with the audience for an hour afterwards around the country. The whole schedule is there on the website.
So he came to you, you got connected to him, or he came to you in spirit and you followed that thread?
Oh, you haven't watched the film. You've got to watch.
No, I didn't watch it yet.
It's stunning. And people are not lukewarm at these screenings. They're just afterwards, just, oh my gosh, life-changing. His parents met me at a conference. I gifted them a reading, but 2 days before the scheduled reading, he dropped in on me with all kinds of evidence that was validated by Dr. Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona, by his parents, of course. Then I did the actual reading, and it was also off the charts evidential. We brought in scoring, comparing a control person with if it had actually been Wolf, which it was, comparing bar charts to see how valid this was. But there were certain things that didn't make sense in the drop-in and the reading. And that's where the mystery comes together in the documentary. Everything started coming together, and that's what he was getting at. It's based on my book, Wolf's Message, which goes into much more detail than the 1 hour documentary.
Ooh. What? You said Dr. Gary Schwartz. Has he studied your brain?
He has not. IONS, the Institute of Noetic Science, has hooked me up to the EEG and done the studies while I'm doing exercises for them. Dr. Schwartz had me tested in his laboratory of consciousness at the University of Arizona and bringing through certain people across the veil. He wouldn't tell me who they were, but got all this information that once he told me who they were, because I couldn't believe it, everything matched them. It was phenomenal.
What did IONS find?
IONS. There's IONS, International Association of Near-Death Studies.
I'm sorry.
Had near-death experience.
This is Noetic Sciences.
Noetic Sciences. Yeah. There was definitely a correlation. There was something more than chance that I was connecting to beings that were telling me things. The most phenomenal thing happened before the experiments even started. I had that skull cap on with 120 leads to the computer, and I had trained myself to drop into an alpha brainwave state because that's perfect for doing readings. So while Dr. Radin was hooking me up, I decided to play a little and drop into an alpha state without telling him. And it's very easy. Once I have hemisync recordings, one of them is called The Training Ground, and I train people to access alpha and theta states. So I just took one nice breath with alpha as my intention. And Dr. Radin looked at me all of a sudden. He said, you're just suddenly putting out some very coherent alpha waves. And he turned the computer, and you could see my brain was just normal monkey mind as we're chatting. And then all of a sudden, all the sine waves go within alpha frequency, and they're all in phase. And I did that with intention. This is why I say this is science. Mediumship is not woo-woo. I know I want to connect with the spirit. I need to prepare the instrument by going into alpha state with a clear intention, becoming as coherent as possible, and coming into resonance with the energy field of a being I can't see, but I know is here because it's going to serve a higher purpose.
What's the difference between alpha and theta?
Much slower theta. Okay. Alpha, we drop into alpha all the time. Just when you're vegging, watching TV, that's alpha, but that's unproductive alpha. That's just blah. But if a productive alpha is alert yet relaxed and quiet, theta is deeper, slower, and that's when you can really connect immediately with the spirits and do some channeling.
And theta, I think, is when you're in that in-between sleep state, right? Like when
You're not asleep, but it's close. Delta is a sleep state.
But so my first experience was like when I woke up at like 4 a.m. and then fell back asleep. And that
Yes.
isn't that the theta brainwave
Most
state,
likely.
right?
Very likely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what would you like to leave people with today as like 3 takeaways for what they can begin to do?
That's so funny.
Did
You
something
said
just
3.
snag you? You look
Yeah,
like
it
you
did
got snagged.
I did, because when I talk about living the awakened way, I talk about the 3 E's of how to do that.
Which is so funny because I never ask this question. I never ask at the end, what are the 3 things? I don't know what, again, snagged.
Simple. And this is not linear. These, you just do them as it arises in awareness to do it. Number 1, educate yourself, the 3 E's. Educate yourself about this greater reality. You're already watching Amy's podcast or listening. And so now you have several good books on your reading list. Read Making the Afterlife Connection, The Awakened Way. Watch my hundreds of videos. Watch videos of people who've had near-death experiences. If you're intrigued by this, educate yourself as much as you can. And in the meantime, experience these. I don't like to use the word altered states because that sounds scary. Expanded states for yourself. Do my sip of the divine. The instructions are right online or in my books. Try the Bless Me method. Watch your belief before you do so. Believe that you can have an experience. So experience for yourself through meditation or practicing presence or giving permission and setting the intention to be snagged. Start to experience those snags. Pull the thread and ask, why did that snag me? Act on what you sense. Now you're experiencing for yourself flow, which, by the way, is wolf spelled backwards.
Which, by the way, is also the card I pulled today before I started to do. I don't know if people can see it.
Yes, there it is. Flow.
Yep.
And then the final E to, where are you going to go with this is engage higher consciousness. Talk to your loved ones who have passed. I guarantee you they hear you. And just keep your commitment high to these practices until you hear them back. Engage a presence when you sense it. Who is this? Instead of being scared, say, oh, that's just my normal human reaction, but who is this? And if you're not of the light, you have to step out of my field now. That's all you need. And then engage guides by saying, please help me with this. I may not be convinced that you're real, but give me a sign. What sign are you going to give me to show me that you're real? And then you have to listen. And something will pop into awareness. You'll see something or you'll hear something and you'll say, all right, so prove it with that. And then it's going to pop up in your life. And I hope you gasp because you're now engaging higher consciousness. So it's an ongoing process of educating, experiencing, and engaging.
Well, Suzanne, this was phenomenal, as I knew it would be. And I'm so excited to have finally been in conversation with you after many years of lurking. Tell everybody, you have so much going on. I know you've touched on a lot of it, but let's wrap it all up here. Where can they find you? This is your new book, but you've got many, many books out there. Making the Afterlife Connection is your new one. The Wolf's Way is the movie. Where else? Where can they find all these delicious meditations? And I have to say, they are delicious.
SuzanneGiesemann.com. You got to try The Journey of Remembrance. It's not really a meditation. It's an experience. 32 minutes of bliss. Okay. You'll remember who you are when you a soul. When
my kids just left. All 3 of them are gone for camp. So I have 8 weeks of journeying into bliss. So I will definitely, and 32 minutes is nothing when you've got, no one needing you to make dinner or get to their baseball games. So I'm looking forward to that. Suzanne, thank you so much for your time today.
It's been a joy. Thanks for asking the fun questions.
Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.